Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Muslim Marriage Podcast, where we talk about healthy relationships from a Muslim lens. I'm Zahra Hassan,
And I'm AJ, and we've been married for 3 years now.
and let's get started.
Let's get started.
On this week's episode, we're going to talk about how to be open with your spouse. This is a topic. It's like just before we started the podcast, you were telling me that a majority of our listeners are not married, but this is a topic that even a lot of the people who are not married, it's on their minds.
Yeah.
They're concerned about how is it that am I going to be vulnerable enough to be able to share my life and space with another human being in my house.
Before we get too far into it, I want to apologize.
Oh,
This episode of ours is going to be discriminatory.
oh,
It's going to discriminate against detectives.
detectives?
Yeah.
Why?
You know how detectives in their relationships, they never really get very far in their conversations. Like
Okay.
they'll open it up, but then they'll shut the case down again.
Okay, all right. Okay, Conan, let's keep
It's
going.
an open and shut case.
Let's keep going. Given all of that, there have been quite a few questions on multiple forums, so we're gonna go through one that I found today on r/Muslim marriage, and in attempting to answer this question, inshallah, we'll be able to cover the important information here. All of that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
Okay, here we go. So this gentleman asks, he says, my wife will not let me pay for anything or let me buy her gifts. I feel like less of a man. Right? So that's the title of the question. He says, my wife and I, and he's 25 years old, have been married for 1 year. Alhamdulillah, we are happy. For the meher, she asked for $0. I insisted that it is her right to ask, but she said she does not want anything. Again, for the wedding ring and wedding dresses, she did not let me pay for them. She purchased them of her own liking and paid herself, or her family paid. She bought me my ring and other gifts, even though I insisted no. For expenses and bills, she wanted us to half it. She pays half the rent and electric and food. I can pay for all of it myself, but she says no. I gave her my credit card to use, but she does not use a single pound. She buys her makeup, clothing, jewelries, and personal items with her own money. She did well in her courses last term, and I offered to take her shopping to treat her, but she declined. She declines gifts for her birthday and other occasions, saying it's a waste of money, but she will spend hundreds of pounds on gifts for me. I appreciate them very much, but I can't do the same for her. The brother goes on to explain a number of the other examples where the sister, his wife, is not giving him space to pay for things. So we're just going to skip ahead to the bottom. He says, I feel like my masculinity is being taken away from me as I cannot provide or financially support my own wife. When we are outside, I see other men paying for their wives shopping, or her friends will show her what their husbands have bought them, and it hurts me that she will not let me spoil her sometimes, or at least let me cover the basics for her. I have raised this topic with her, but she does not seem to see it from my perspective. She thinks she is doing me a benefit, but I feel like a failure of a man and a husband.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
I understand. Okay, so what do you think about all of what the brother said?
Some people might not see that as a problem,
Okay.
right? But like for me, I do see it as a problem
Mm-hmm.
because he's trying to make his stance, his viewpoint known.
I see.
And in her attempt to be as generous and charitable to her husband as she can,
Mhm.
she's in turn suffocating him a bit,
Yeah.
right? It was hard for me to find while you were talking a way to relate this, like a vice versa way.
Yeah.
The best that I could come up with is if husband and wife have a child,
Mm-hmm.
and the husband says, no, I'll take care of the child. You don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, okay, well, I'm gonna cook food for him. He's like, no, don't do that. I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll take care of it, right? And every motherly duty that she has an opportunity to take
Yeah.
for the child, he says, no, don't do it. No, stop. I'll do it,
Yeah.
right? And then she'll see other mothers taking the children to like daycare or like to the park or something,
Yeah.
right? and she wants to be the one that takes the child to the park and has that time with them, or she wants to be the one that tucks him in at night or something like that,
Yeah.
or she wants to at least be involved in some way. But the husband keeps saying, no, don't worry, I'll take care of it. I got this.
Yeah.
You just chill, right? That's the only way I can sort of relate it to the other side to try to make it understood how serious that could be.
How it would feel for the other, on the other side. What would you recommend to this brother who's going through this? Because
honestly,
he said he tried to have the conversation with his wife.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult. The communication is not fully there, so it's very difficult for him to speak about it in such a way that she understands.
What he can try to do is he can start refusing her gifts.
Oh.
Yeah, he can try refusing her gifts.
Okay.
And see if she'll question, like, what's going on here? Why is he suddenly refusing my gifts? Because refusing the gifts is not really like a big deal.
Okay.
It's still a big deal, but it's not like a huge deal, right?
Yeah.
But it, at the very least, should get the conversation going in a more serious manner, because if someone refuses your gift, you're going to be like, something's wrong.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, just to at least get the point across that that this is painful for him.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I understand. I think that the way forward is going to be through communication, is going to be through having sit-down conversation. Not the question.
Apparently he's already tried that.
Yes, but not all conversations are the same. They're not all created equal, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very important skill to understand how to communicate what you are feeling internally in such a way that the other person has the right information to be able to understand what it is that you're feeling and why you're feeling this way and what it is that you need to be different. And during the process of this communication, it's important to leave space so that the other person also can be understood, and make do you see? So there's an exchange of information back and forth. So we talk about how to do this multiple times in multiple other podcasts. If somebody would like a review of that, I would recommend the first year of marriage. We go through this in some detail on how to establish these conflict resolution routines and exactly how to have this discussion through the 5 steps. So I would go back to that one. But for the sake of brevity, the answer is going to be in having this conversation. But before we talk about how to have that conversation with this specific example, let's talk about a little bit of what might be going on, because that's something that that's what I meant by that I've been seeing people ask questions about, this concept of how do I share? How do I open up a little bit?
Yeah.
Be a little bit open with my spouse. Now, in this particular case with the young lady, what she's having a difficulty sharing with is specifically with finances. That's what the brother has mentioned. I would be curious to know if this extends to, is she emotionally available? Do you feel like you can go and talk to her about things, or can she talk to you about things? Is the same like it just in other different dimensions and aspects? Is the openness there? Is it specifically this one area? And this touches on a concept of hyper independence. Hyper independence. When you talk about hyper independence, codependence, all these things. Sorry, codependence. Think of it as the way in which the two of you interact with each other, the dependency between the two of you as existing on a spectrum. And on one extreme, you have hyper-independence, and on the other extreme, you have codependence.
Yeah.
And the easiest way that I would conceptualize the two is with respect to boundaries in space.
Yeah.
So on the one extreme with the hyper-independence, this is somebody who is very uncomfortable with giving you any space, and whose boundaries are very high, very, very high wall boundaries, well fortified, concrete boundaries with moats and alligators.
Almost like a great wall of some sort.
The greatest wall, right? So she's making absolutely no way for him to contribute financially at all. Full boundaries, right? Whereas codependency is on the other extreme, where there are no boundaries. This individual is completely open, and all they have is spaces for the other person.
Yeah.
This is also an issue, because this complete lack of boundaries is now in the realm of self-sacrifice, which is
Yeah.
what you see a lot with codependent relationships. So neither is good. Neither extreme is good. And in Islam, we are taught that the best place to be between extremes is at the balance point, the middle.
Yeah, in the middle.
Yes. In this case, the balance point is called interdependency. Interdependency, which is there is some boundaries that are in place, right? So that means not codependent, because codependency represents no boundaries or little boundaries.
Yeah.
So with interdependency, you're going to have some boundaries in place and also some space that you're able to make for your spouse. So you're going to have boundaries and space, right? And that's ideally where you would like to be. And what that would look like is what this gentleman is pushing for with respect to finances in his home, of let's have a conversation where I can contribute and you can contribute.
Yeah.
What is it that you're comfortable with me contributing, and then I'm comfortable with contributing? Let's find that happy space in between the two, because
it's a
yeah.
relationship. Currently, we have a relationship between two cats.
Okay.
That's not ideal.
Yes.
You want a relationship between a cat and a bunny. I'll explain.
Okay, I was going to say.
I'll explain.
Because that's a meal. That's what that relationship is.
So a cat, well, hopefully if they really love each other,
okay,
they will not attack each other.
Okay.
So a cat shows dominance
Mm-hmm.
by grooming the other.
Yes.
And a bunny shows dominance by being groomed.
Okay.
So a cat and a bunny,
Mm-hmm.
they would have a perfect friendship
Mm-hmm.
because both think that they're the dominant in the case.
All right. So this is not that at all. This is not.
Yeah, I'm telling you, this is a relationship between two cats.
Oh, I
That's
see
what
what
we
you're
have.
saying. Yeah.
Yeah, we got two people that want to be the dominant one in the relationship.
I see what you're saying. Yes. So that could be definitely what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so if we have this idea, this conceptualization of hyper-independence, interdependence in the middle, and then codependence on the other extreme, and the goal is interdependence.
Yeah.
So this episode is going to be specifically focusing on the hyper-independence.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing to talk about is how that happens. Why is, like, what's going on? What are the mechanisms in place that would make the sister want to have these boundaries, leave no space?
Yeah.
Right. In general, this comes from a place of fear, usually. Fear, and that fear can be related to either other people or to herself.
Yeah.
So if the fear is related to other people, there could be.
Oh, you think it could be like white knight syndrome?
That's new. I've not
Oh,
heard that
you don't
before.
know about white knight syndrome?
This is new.
White knight syndrome is if someone's not confident in themselves, either their personality or looks, or they find some sort of deficiency where they don't think that they themselves would be capable of attracting a partner. They end up trying to be super nice to the other person, defending them on things that they don't need to be defended upon.
Yeah.
Right? Trying to support them in places that they don't need support. Right? They try to get themselves in through the friendship angle.
Yeah.
And they try to be white knights to try to save the person.
Yeah. So that would be more likely on the codependent side of this spectrum. Actually, now thinking about it, it could I would have to ask a lot of.
It could be codependent.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It could be codependency, right?
Yeah.
So there would need to be a lot more information. I would have to ask a lot more questions of the sister to try to understand what the mechanisms are.
I think it would be more likely that she'd be codependent because the other one, what was it called? Hyper independent.
Yeah.
She wouldn't think about him at all, right? She would just keep her money to herself.
Yeah, but no, that's what I'm saying. It's interesting. It all depends on what is the motivating fear. What is it that the person is afraid of? So it can be codependence. It can be hyperindependence. For our purposes, let's say it's hyperindependence.
Okay.
So in the case of hyper independence, it could be fear related to, again, to other people or to yourself. If
Mhm.
it's a fear related to other people, it's going to be the inner dialogue is going to be something like, I don't trust this person to respect my boundaries.
Yeah.
So that if I were to give this person space, I don't trust them to I don't trust them to trespass beyond that
Mhm.
and go into the realm of my boundaries. So
Yeah.
this is somebody who's worried about being taken advantage of.
Sure.
So this is somebody who has some sort of messaging through their childhood that other people will take advantage of you if you give them the chance.
Just to clarify, we're talking about the archetype right now. We're not talking about that person.
No, definitely, yeah. Honestly, every time I bring up a question, I just use the question to illustrate for our purposes. I have no information to be able to even begin to answer this brother's question specifically, right? But let's just assuming that this is a case of hyper independence. That could be one source of the inner dialogue of, I don't trust other people to respect my boundaries. That could be the issue. How that can come to be is one way or another, this person receives messaging over and over that other people are not to be trusted, right? So this can happen for a young girl or a young boy that they grew up in a household where they saw that the opposite gender family member was taking advantage of the same gendered family member financially.
Yeah.
Right? So in this case, she's a young girl. Let's say that the father kept taking advantage of her mother financially, or her mother would tell her, don't trust men with your money. They're going to take your money, right? Just messaging that are telling her that in this specific domain, if you allow people space, if you allow a man space, he will take advantage of you.
Yeah.
Exact same messaging can happen for a young man. So that's with fears with respect to other people, right? There are many others, but that's a common one. With fears with respect to yourself, it's usually around being a burden. That if I allow other person space, right? And part of being offering a person space is allowing yourself to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right? And having needs and saying, for example, I need help paying for this.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you go through further in the initial question with the sister, she goes to school, she works full time, she just does everything on her own, doesn't ask for help. Even at one point, something that was 80 pounds, doesn't ask for help. So she's in this, if we were to use her case as an example, she'd be worried that 80 pounds would be a burden. So it's this fear, this internal dialogue is, I am a burden.
Yeah.
And if I ask for help, this person won't like me because I am a burden. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. So both of those mechanisms can lead to putting up very high boundaries, right? Of if I allow space, I'm either going to be a burden or I'll be taken advantage of. So let me be protected by my boundaries.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna run 3 phrases past you.
Okay.
I want you to tell me if they're independent,
Hyper independent,
or codependent.
Okay, let's try.
The first one is, I need help, and I feel like I can't do this all on my own.
That's interdependence.
Wonderful.
Okay.
The second one is,
interdependent.
I've fallen and I can't get up.
That's just a statement. Are you saying that to someone?
Well, which is it? Is it hyper independent or is it codependent?
Well, if it was on the spectrum, right?
Sure.
It would be going towards the direction of hyper independence.
But I've fallen and I can't get up. It seems like a call for help, right?
Yes.
Wouldn't that be more towards the codependent side?
Honestly, it could be either one. There would need to be more context.
The last phrase.
Yeah.
Who are you and why you're in my house?
I don't. Which one would that be?
I have to imagine that would be hyper independent.
Hyper dependent.
Because you forgot about the person already.
Your spouse?
Y'all got married the other day.
Who are you? What are you?
You just immediately forgot about her? Who are you and why you're in my house?
Is that why you say that? Okay.
Is it? Oh, yeah. No, yeah, that's right. Wait, why are you here?
Exactly. So that's actually a very good exercise. I like that because what it illustrates is that context is dependent,
Mm.
right? So when I sit down, so this is just information for a person to be able to conceptualize how that spectrum works so that they
Yeah.
can try to understand a little bit of where they might be in some areas.
Yeah.
And it's also important to understand that it's not across all areas.
Yeah.
Right, so somebody might have a little bit of hyper independence with finances, but they might be okay with the emotional vulnerability.
Mhm.
You see what or vice versa, or there's many different dimensions to marriage. So you might be hyper independent in some dimensions and not in others. You
Yeah.
might be codependent in some dimensions and not in others. Right, so there is a lot of space for nuance for individuality and context.
Mhm.
So that's why it's a little bit of a difficult topic to discuss. But having said all that,
Yeah.
the next question that clients may have is, okay, I'm somebody who really likes to be on my own. And I've lived on my own for quite some time. And I have this way of life that I really like, that I'm very comfortable with. How am I supposed to share that with another person? Right? So that might be somebody who's used to taking care of themselves, and is a little bit further up towards hyper independence on the spectrum, and now they're asking, how do I go towards interdependence, right?
Yeah.
That's how that question is framed. How would we begin to answer that?
Okay, cool. I would say whenever you think about them, the partner,
Mm-hmm.
right? You send a message, right?
Okay.
So if, for example, you think about the partner once a day, which is an extreme example. If you think about them once a day,
mm-hmm.
you would send a message once a day.
Mm-hmm.
And on a day that you don't send a message, you'll be like panicked. Right?
Oh, yeah.
You'll be like, wait, why didn't I send a message today?
Mm-hmm.
Did I not think about them?
Yeah.
And then you'll try to make an effort that day to, at the very least, go
that's an
and
approach.
talk to them.
Are you saying during marriage or talking
during
stage
marriage?
During marriage.
And then, I have to imagine over time it'll evolve, because now it becomes a habit for you to think about them at least once every day. And from there, people are forgetful.
Yeah.
So they'll start thinking to themselves,
yeah,
did I think about her? I'm thinking about her now.
Yeah.
Right? So it just increases the frequency in which you're thinking about her.
I think what's happening is that you're answering the question from one specific dimension of interdependence, right?
I was going to bring in the shovel later.
Okay. So this dimension of interdependence that you're talking about is the emotional availability.
Yeah.
Right. Emotional availability, which is another big topic. But
I imagine emotional availability is like the biggest.
Yeah, it's an important one.
Wouldn't it be?
Yes, it's probably one of the most important. But like for this gentleman, he says somewhere here that he's happy with every other aspect of his marriage except this one. So
but is she happy with every other aspect?
We don't know. There's so much we don't know. But the reason I'm bringing his example is, let's say that she's emotionally available and he's happy with the rest of the marriage and from an emotional aspect except this one.
Yeah.
You see? So emotional availability is very important, but so are other ones, right?
Sorry, I just thought of a joke. Sorry, we'll move past it.
Okay,
we'll move past it. You can remind me in I don't know. You know what? I'll just tell it now.
All right, go ahead.
I'll just tell it now.
Okay.
There was a tutor.
Okay.
Right. He taught this family mathematics. Let's say.
Okay.
He taught them for like a week. And he came to them and he was expecting his paycheck. And they said, sorry, we don't have it for you.
Okay.
And then he taught for another week.
Okay.
And now he's expecting 2 paychecks. And he said, sorry, we don't have it for you. So he took a break. He rested. And they said, what's going on here, tutor? Why are you resting? He said, I need my restitution.
Oh, goodness. That was fantastic and terrible at the same time.
It was horrible. Let's move on.
Okay. So we were talking, you were giving an example specifically from emotional availability, right? And I think I understand why you gave that example, because in answering the question of how do I move from hyperdependence to interdependence, we're going to talk about our own experiences, right? To be able to help people to understand how you can start moving up and down on the spectrum. Even if you're codependent, it's a little bit more complicated and involved, but conceptually, at least, even if you're codependent, how you can move up and down on the spectrum. And the way that you can do that is the same way that you came to be where you are on the spectrum, and that's going to be through repetition. So there are areas in which I am hyper independent, right, and there are areas in which you are hyper independent, where we can give an example where I am hyper independent in that I have difficulty asking for help. And the reason for that is with respect to that fear of being a burden. You will I remember there are examples where it would be the dead of winter, and this is before we had a car, alhamdulillah, and I'd be walking down the sidewalk, icy, it'd be very like -40, I forgot my gloves, all of these things going on, and we're carrying groceries. And another person of our backers, we're Somali, so another Somali individual will drive by and say, hey, let me drive you home, let's just get in the car. I don't have it in me to say yes. Like no matter what's happening, no matter how freezer burn my fingers are, or I'm forgetting the word, frostbitten my fingers are, I don't have it in me to say yes. And obviously I carried this into our marriage. And I'm sure like you've noticed it on multiple different occasions. So the way that we address it is that you will notice it in me, right? So you will notice some place in which that I am not asking for help that is interfering with your desire to help me.
Yeah, that's when I bring out the Kevin Hart famous line. Help me help you. Did he say that?
It's not the line, but we can't say it.
Help me.
Okay.
I think that's what he says.
Yes.
No, I think it was Ryan Gosling, was it?
No, it was Kevin Hart.
No, it was no, someone else. It was in a movie. Someone said, "Let me help you," or something like that, or "Help me help you."
Okay, all right. So let's just assume. Let's blow right past that, and come back to what we're talking about.
Indeed.
Yes. But you would tell me, this is something. So let's talk about an example.
Yeah.
Right. So we have this habit that we work during the day, that you work during the day, I work during the day. And at some point in the evening, we would make time for each other to sit down and have a conversation or watch something, right? And the way that we make this time for each other is that I would come back upstairs and come back upstairs and find a place to sit down upstairs, right? Somewhere in our room.
Usually she's the one that wants to have the conversation more than I do.
All right.
But she entices me with Netflix.
All right. This is
and
sure.
then when I get close, she puts the Netflix away and she says, "Let's have a nice conversation." And we end up talking for an hour. It's a wonderful time. It's a wonderful time. But
all right,
I was expecting Netflix.
All right, let's call me out. But it's hard for me to come and to you and say, "Hi, I'm ready now to hang out and do something together."
Yeah.
That's hard for me.
Yeah.
So what I do is I do it indirectly by just simply being present. And that was not enough because you were not picking up what I was putting down.
No, I have a very bad ability to pick up hints.
So what would happen is that I would be sitting down and just scrolling or working or doing something absent-mindedly and waiting for you to notice me for hours.
And I would see her scrolling and thinking and doing things absent-mindedly, and I would think that she wants to do that of her own accord.
Okay.
And she just came upstairs just to chill.
Yeah.
I'm I don't want to bother her.
Yeah, so there was that miscommunication, right? So what would end up doing is that I would feel frustrated and you would feel frustrated.
I would feel nothing.
Okay, it's worse. But I would feel frustrated. And despite this frustration, it was very hard for me to say I feel frustrated because I'm here to spend time together, but you're not. But do you see what I'm
And
saying?
I'm not noticing.
Yes, exactly. Whereas the issue itself was me not saying, "Hi, I'm here to spend time together," which would have made it much easier. So if in an interdependent relationship, if I were able to,
you would bust in through that door and say, "Let's hang out."
Exactly.
Just like Kramer.
Kramer, right?
Yeah.
So, but not Kramer, but Kramer, right?
Yeah, Kramer.
Yes.
With all his hateful spite.
Okay. So there's that example where your hyper independence kicks in, is that you don't notice.
Yeah.
That you don't notice that I'm there.
Yeah, I'm just doing my own thing.
Exactly, because you're used to just.
That's how it is. When I was growing up, I used to play basketball. My family used to play soccer. So then when they would go out to play soccer, I would hang back and I would just chill.
Yeah.
I would just stay in the house.
You're as introverted as I am. So became.
No, I'm not necessarily introverted, right?
You're not? Okay.
No, I had the ability to make friends in high school. Not necessarily shy to. It's weird. Like me, growing up was weird because at some stages in my life, I would be shy and I would not initiate contact with anyone. And then at other stages in my life, I'd be the class clown.
Yeah.
And then for the people in 1 year, I remember this was like in high school, in grade 9 to grade 10.
Yeah.
In grade 9, I was super outspoken, class clown. And then in grade 10, with this very same class, the very same students, I was very quiet.
Okay. So that's how you, so you're right. So it's probably somewhere in the middle part of the spectrum. But what I'm saying is that you're very comfortable spending time on your own. Yeah. And I'm also very comfortable spending time on my own. But in the way that you're comfortable, you didn't see that this is what I was asking for. Does that make sense? Whereas in an interdependent relationship, you would have noticed more easily. So that's something that you're also working towards. So that's just one example. And there are many different examples. So how it is that we resolve this issue is once we notice that this is a problem, that this is a pattern that's happening, you sit down and have a conversation.
Yeah, together.
So, exactly. So this is how, so with respect to finally answering the question of the gentleman at the beginning of the podcast of how do I fix this, the answer is going to be to talk it out. And how to talk it out matters. So this is how we talked it out with ourselves, where we sit down and I sit down and I explain, hey, I understand. Remember, whenever you're sitting down and having a discussion with your spouse, the first step is to validate their experience, right? So I could validate my best understanding of your experience. So that conversation went something like, I understand that, you're very tired after work and that you spend time on your own. And I understand that I'm not making myself clear that this is what I want to do, right? That what I want to do is hang out. I understand that. And that I might on some level be expecting you to read my cues and my mind rather than me speaking what it is that I want specifically. And that can be frustrating. However, it's something that I'm still working on, right? Like I'm still not there yet. In fact, this conversation is very hard for me. That's literally how that conversation went. This conversation itself is very hard for me. And until I can get there, I'm just going to need for you to read some of these, the following cues, and then I will give you some examples.
I need you to cross that bridge and put it away the match.
There's a match?
Yeah.
What's the match?
It's not like a soccer match. It's like a lighter.
Okay. That's
cross
worse.
The bridge, but don't hold that flaming torch.
Okay. All right. There's a reference I'm not.
Otherwise, you'll end up burning that bridge.
Okay. Okay. All right. No burn bridges. But inshallah, that makes sense. Yeah. Right? Inshallah. Like, if you remember, that's how that conversation went. And after speaking my experience, the third step, so the first step is validate their experience. Second step is state your experience from a place of how you feel internally, right? Try to make it so that this part is a little bit tricky and it takes practice and introspection. But the goal of it is to try to really translate your feelings into them so that they can feel the way that you feel, to understand. And then the third step is asking them if they understood. So does that make sense? Right.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And then fourth step is to state your need. So in this case, my need is if you can just give me a little bit of grace that when you see me come upstairs, please understand that means I want to hang out. So until I can say that out loud, just understand that that's what I mean. And then the fifth.
And for the men, this is not the part where you take out the boxing gloves. Not yet.
No, not yet. Okay.
No.
And then the fifth and final step is to check it and make sure that your partner understood. So does it understood again? So you say, does that make sense?
Yeah, it
It
does.
does make sense. So that's how you have that conversation.
Alhamdulillah.
So for the brother, the way that he can have this conversation, right? Or if somebody else is going through something similar with a spouse who's hyper independent around finances,
I understand that you're bougie like that.
Okay, no, don't do that.
I understand that you got the finances, and I understand you got those riches
Okay.
to make me swoon. Hooey.
All right.
I get it. But I want to be bougie sometimes, you know?
You know that might work.
Sometimes I want to be the one that has the ability to get your nails on fleek, you know?
Yeah.
Sometimes I want to be the one spending the Zaza on you.
All right. That's
I'm using terms that I've learned off of these little YouTube thingies.
the
with
internet.
kids. Yeah.
The internet.
They say Riz and Zaza. I don't know what they mean, but it has to mean something cool.
We've that's alhamdulillah. That's how we know we've arrived at old age.
Apparently,
We
and
don't
I've learned
understand
this
that.
recently.
Yeah.
Apparently, 10-year-olds with the Zoomers,
Okay.
cringe apparently means cool now.
Is it really?
Yeah. Cringe apparently means cool now. I
That's-
don't know. Somehow it made it a belt turn. Someone will say that movie was cringe, and you're like, "Oh, you didn't like it? No, we really liked it." What?
That's so cringe.
That's so cringe.
Okay. But just to wrap it up, right?
Yeah.
Just to wrap it up. So the way that this brother or somebody who's having similar issues would have this conversation is they sit down and say, I understand from your point. So he's trying to validate her experience to the best of his understanding. So I'm only going based on what he wrote. I might be completely off. Just he might say something like, I understand that it might be very hard for you to allow me to help to it might be painful or hard for you to allow me to help you financially. I understand that.
Yeah. To allow me into your financial space.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know that can be very uncomfortable, especially that we've been married for a year, right?
Yeah.
And that you might feel that there needs to be more trust that's built up. Just his best guess of why, of his experience, of what her experience is.
Yeah.
And if you're wrong, you can just simply say, am I right? Did I get it right? And your spouse will correct you and say, no, that's not what it is at all.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you their experience. But you start there with her experience, right? And then after that, he can talk about his experience and say, however, it's very important for me to be able to feel like I can contribute as well to you, to your financial well-being, because that's what it makes me feel like that
Wanted.
I'm wanted. Yes, that's a good word. It makes me feel like I'm wanted.
Needed.
Yeah. All right.
Desired.
There you needed. Yes, desired. So, and etc. So just this is the part that's the most difficult in all of the steps. The one that you're gonna have to take some time to sit down and journal out to try to get the words right.
Yeah.
So I'm speaking for him, so I'm not gonna get those words right.
Of course.
So he, etc. And then at that point, he will ask her, "Does that make sense?"
Does
Step
that
three.
make sense?
Step 3, and it will or won't. And then after that, step 4, he can state his need. What would really help me out is if you were started to make space so that we can share some of the finances. We don't have to start big. We can start small.
Yeah.
And then we can build our way up from there. Right. And etc.
Yeah.
And then in step 5, he double checks to make sure that she understands, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What I would also add here is if she tells you in step 1, when you're trying to understand her experience or validate her experience, if you're completely off, right? If and she told you no, that's not what it is at all, and she tells you what I really need have an issue with is, for example, I have difficulty with trusting other people, that they might take advantage of me. Like if she that might be what's going on with her, right?
Yeah.
And then you can validate that and say, yeah, no, I understand how that can happen. What can I do? So you make space within that first part for discussing her needs. So what is it that I can do to help you, to reassure you that I have no intention to take advantage of you? Most likely that it's going to take time, but how can we start to take those steps? You see?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that first step is the most important in the 5 steps. The second step is the most difficult.
Yeah.
In the 5 steps.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just go through it like that. Inshallah, hopefully this example made it a little bit more clear of how to start to have those difficult conversations. What's true is that everybody is hyper independent in some aspect in their life, and that they're going to, part of when you're married, especially in that first year, one of the challenges is learning how to make space for your spouse. In those areas in which you're not used to making space for people that for one reason or another can feel a little bit scary.
Yeah.
Of being vulnerable in that way.
Yeah.
So in trying to navigate that, the way to navigate it is through those conversations, is through communications, so that it again highlights why it's so important in that first year or in that first few months to establish healthy communication routines or healthy communication habits, so that you will have a platform to have these discussions and to navigate these areas in which one of you or both of you are being a little bit closed off, a little bit hyper independent.
Yeah.
And to be able to come closer towards interdependence. Nobody moves there immediately. Nobody gets there right away. Very few people just start their marriage right there off in the middle. Most people are somewhere on the spectrum, and both of you are moving towards the middle. That's what marriage is more likely to be.
Absolutely.
That's going to take a lot of conversations. Yeah. It's going to take patience, and it might take years.
Yeah.
Definitely you and I are still on our way, right? So it's but if you have the right partner who's willing to engage in those conversations with you, and you have the right platform where you've established those healthy communication routines, inshallah, you'll be better off on the right foot.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
Now, before we finish up the episode, I've been having some deep thinking about the joke that I made earlier.
Okay, which one?
The restitution joke.
Okay.
For those of you that want to use that joke, and I encourage it, there's an improvement. Instead of saying restitution as the punchline, because it was a tutor, we can say restitution.
There you go.
That's better.
Yeah. Trademark.
No.
No trademark?
I cannot trademark restitution.
Okay, open source.
It's for everyone.
Okay. Okay, I'm glad to know. Inshallah, hopefully that was made clear. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel and you're listening on YouTube, we would really appreciate if you would go and subscribe. It helps us to get the message out to more people. If you have any comments or any opinions, or if you yourself are concerned about being open when you become married, inshallah, feel free to share that in comments or reach out to us directly at support@ZahraHassanCoaching.com. If you're a young woman and you are looking for a spouse and you're using the dating apps and you are exhausted by the dating app experience, I offer a webinar for women, which is still free but is about to not be free, inshallah. You can find a link to that webinar on the About section of YouTube if you're listening on YouTube, or in the description if you're listening on any other podcast platform, or on our Instagram page at Zahra Hassan Coaching.
Wonderful.
That's it. Those are all the things. So if you have made it this long, Jazakallah khair, we really appreciate you. And
like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe.
Hit the bell.
All right. And Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.